Good morning, and welcome to LLT 121 Classical Mythology. I fought the temptation to begin the class by saying, welcome back, my friends, to this show that never ends. So glad you could attend, because this story that we're about to go into today, this morning, has been told and retold now for about 3,200 years. I ask you to keep in mind that the events of the Iliad are tied to the Trojan War, which is now known for a fact to have taken place around 1200 BC. The tales of the Trojan War were passed on orally by word of mouth at a time during which the ancient Greeks more or less had forgotten how to write. It's not like, gee, what is that thing you do with the pencil again? Keep in mind that in ancient Greek, around 1200 BC, very few people, to start with, were literate. Somehow, between 1200 BC and 1100 BC, in the ancient Greek world, there was the cataclysmic downfall of what we now think of as the Mycenaean era of ancient Greece. The few literate people who lived either died without teaching anybody how to read and write, or basically forgot, or what have you. But these stories of the Iliad, the story of the Odyssey, were primarily spread about by word of mouth. A poet, a bard, if you will, who was invited to a gathering and would sit down with his eyes closed, off the top of his head, spout out the story of the wrath of Achilles. How Achilles got mad. And if you have ever been in one of these situations, we have parents here in the audience today. Tell me a story, Mommy. Tell me a story, Grandpa. What have you? I hope nobody here is anybody's grandfather today. You're too young for that sort of thing. You tend to embellish stories, or you tend to change the details of the story to reflect what your audience is looking for. If, for example, you are giving a speech to a group of nuns, you are not going to work in all sorts of interesting details about World War II or something like that. If you are speaking to the veterans of foreign wars, you are not going to talk about how everybody ought to get in touch with their own feelings, because they don't care. They're not going to listen to you. And when you are paid to do this, paid to tell the story of what happened when Achilles got mad, you had better work in the details that people like, or you'll go hungry. That's going to explain a lot of the really bizarre details. The other thing is that no matter how many times you tell this story, you can change the details as much as you want, but the ending always has to come out the same. I offer you as an example the movie Gettysburg. It's a fine movie about a battle that took place in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania in 1863. My wife and I own a copy of the movie. We watched it all the time before we went to Gettysburg. The most horrifying thing is on the third day of Gettysburg, the Confederate Army indulged in something known as Pickett's Charge, where 15,000 Confederate soldiers walked a mile towards the Union lines and then ran for the Union defenses and got cut into little bits by cannons, by rifle fire, and all of that. And we watch it over and over again and think about the brave Confederates and the brave Union soldiers. And even I, who am not a Confederate, start to wishing, well, just once, I'd like to see Pickett's division break through the Union lines and chased the Union Army all the way to Washington, D.C., because my heart pours out for them. Just once. I'd like to see the Confederates win the Civil War. Not that I think they should have, but you kind of feel sorry for them after a while. We're in the same bind here with the Iliad. Homer isn't the only guy who ever told this story. He did the best job. When the ancient Greeks remembered how to write, about 750 BC. Oh, yeah. Now, let's see if I got this straight. Yeah, that's A. Oh, cool. First thing that the Greeks did was they set down Homer's version of the Iliad and Odyssey. Supposedly, the ancient Greeks themselves said that they learned it. They learned how to read and write in order to write down Homer's poetry. That's how serious they took it. And the Iliad starts out as a war story. Good God, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. We know that now. We believe that now. But back in 1200 BC, the poets who are telling you the story of the Odyssey and the Iliad have to play up to their audiences, and this is a very militaristic society. So we're going to have lots of gory details about severed eyeballs rolling in the dust and stuff like that in the Iliad. We're going to have hundreds of innocent people killed in various disgustipating ways. But we're also going to have tenderness and love and a big, huge dose of Arti Monthano, no, I get it, at the end. Because it is so much more than a tragedy. Well, I'm babbling too much. You should all go read the Iliad. God help me, the first time I ever had to teach the Iliad, it was like painful because it was all about people getting killed and boasting about it too. I killed Phil the Great. Phil, you will go down to your gibbering grave boasting of the fact that you were killed by Hughes the Magnificent. There's only so many pages of this you can read. But I hope to convince you that there's more good stuff to it. The Iliad is the award-winning story of a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, in the 10th year of the Trojan War. Assume that the Greeks have been besieging Troy for 9 years with, fair to middling results, but nothing's really getting accomplished. In between fighting for the city of Troy, the ancient Greeks go off on raids. They sack cities and stuff like that just to stay in practice, win lots of arete. Yes, I am the sacker of cities. They go off to one city whose name I disremember, but they carry off a young woman by the name of Chryseis, because you get arete points for carrying off women. And then they run back to the camp. Chryseis becomes the property of Achilles, the great Achilles, the hero, the all-time great best killer of the ancient Greeks. Problem is, a plague descends upon the Greek camp. People are just dropping like flies. Nobody knows what the problem is. And here's where the Iliad begins. Book 1, verse 1. Sing, O Muse, the wrath of Achilles. Blah, 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 blah. I don't remember the other part off the top of my head. Remember when I told you that legend by its very nature contains a kernel of historical fact? We've got this big camp full of Greeks camped out in front of a city of Troy. They've been there for 9 years. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell you why the people are dying. Cholera. Bad sanitation. Up until the 19th century, armies had little or no notion of sanitation. They, shall we say, deposited their waste products all in one centralized area, did it in the streams and stuff like that. All sorts of miasmic germs popped up. I could have told them cholera. Try observing a little bit more sanitary practices, and the Greeks will not die like flies. Thank you very much, Achilles. Thank you very much, Agamemnon. No, 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 it's Apollo. Apollo is shooting down all the Greeks. Apollo is mad. Okay, why is Apollo mad this time? It turns out that Chryseis is the daughter of Chrysis. Oh, we knew that. A local priest of Apollo. And Chrysis, who is not happy to have had his daughter carried away, says, "Oh, great Apollo, if ever I have done a sacrifice that made you happy, smite these darned Greeks who stole my baby daughter, my attractive, voluptuous young daughter from me." Are you with me so far? And Apollo comes through. Well, when this information becomes known, the Greeks call a meeting under the leadership of Agamemnon. But Agamemnon is not the king of all the Greeks in the way that I am the king of all people in this room. He is just the first among equals. They can argue with Agamemnon, and they do. Okay. Did I say Chryseis was Achilles' property? I lied. It's Agamemnon's property. She is Agamemnon's property. I knew there was a problem here. And let's erase this. The Greeks are all meeting in council. Apollo is mad because we have taken Chryseis. Well, what's the logical answer to do, Carrie? Think about it. We've taken this woman away from a priest of Apollo. What's the best thing to do? Give her back. But you don't want to do that, really, because that implies that something you did was wrong. You will have to give back your arete points. Moreover, Agamemnon, that's Agamemnon's babe. You know, if Agamemnon gives back his babe, people will say, what a wussy that Agamemnon is. He will lose all his arete points, and he will be deprived of his kleos after he is dead, you know. Yeah, he did kill his daughter, but then he wimped out and gave that girl back. Can't have that. On the other hand, the Greeks are dropping like flies, and finally Achilles says to him, "Darn it, Agamemnon, give that girl back." Easy for you to say, Achilles. I don't see them wanting your girl. I mean, it happens that Achilles has a slave woman named Briseis that he loves a whole deal. He sleeps with her sometimes as if she was his wife. She's property. He stole her fair and square. No, he has a close friend by the name of Patroclus. We'll get to him in a second, so to speak. You mean Achilles is the fact? No, I'm kidding. They are very close friends, and Achilles loves Patroclus. Patroclus loves Achilles. So finally, Agamemnon says, well, all right. I'll give Chryseis back. Odysseus, take her back. But I'm going to take your girl, Achilles. And he grabs Achilles' woman and drags her off. Now, Agamemnon is covered up for his loss of Arte. Yeah, he gave the girl back, but to prove what a macho burly stud he is, he took Achilles'. And at this point, Achilles is of two minds. One of them is to pull out his sword and chop Agamemnon in half. And keep in mind, let's see, what would Jean-Claude Van Damme do in such a situation? What would Sylvester Stallone do in such a situation?
Really loud and start running at something like that.
Right, Agamemnon, right?
Or the bad guy.
Agamemnon. He would splatter Agamemnon all over the walls. He would deck the walls with splops of Agamemnon. But he doesn't. Achilles doesn't. And I know what you're going to say, Scott. You're going to say he did it because the story dictated it. And you're right. I mean, Agamemnon really can't be killed by Achilles, like within the first 200 lines of the Iliad. We got no story then, do we? But on the other hand, it's completely out of character for Sylvester Stallone, for John Wayne, for Achilles to say, you got a point. What you did was very reasonable. I don't feel very good about the fact that you took my slave woman away from me, but I guess I'm just going to have to deal with that. No, I don't think that's going to happen either. So Homer writes into his award-winning poem, The Iliad, a scene where Athena comes down in the guise of a human being and talks sense into Agamemnon's head. Says, I'm going to talk sense into Achilles' head. Achilles, don't kill him. People will be mad at you. Why don't you just take your troops, the Myrmidons, the Ant-Men, why don't you take your troops, go sit by the side of your swift black ship, and pout for a real long time. The old passive-aggressive shtick. So this is what Achilles does. He says, you know, I really ought to chop you in half. But I'm not going to. I'm going to take my men. I'm going to take Patroclus, my close, intimate friend, and we will sit by the side of my swift black ships, hanging around while you guys get your tails kicked. You see, Achilles has two fates. I might as well tell you this. We know how it's going to end. I can tell you this. One fate has him dying young in the Trojan War, winning lots of arete, winning lots of kleos, and being the subject of a poem so famous that it's still tormenting students 3,200 years after Achilles' death. Option number two, he dies really old, really happy, really rich after a long and fulfilling life with no arete and no kleos. Not much of a choice to you or to me. But at any rate, what happens is Achilles says, well, option number two is looking a lot better. Patroclus, let's go pout. And then, in order to make the action even more interesting than it already is, Achilles' mom, Thetis, the influential sea nymph, who was destined to bear a son greater than his father, and did, goes up to Zeus in her capacity as a goddess. And here's another peculiarly enjoyable trait of reading Homer: the attention to character development. Achilles' mom, like anybody's mom would do, runs up to Zeus and says, my child has been disrespected. These bullies are being mean to my boy. Do something about it, Zeus. Zeus, I want you to fix it so that the Greeks get their you-know-what's kicked in over and over again, so they learn that they cannot win the war without my son Achilles. And Zeus says, okay, Thetis, you got it. And the Greeks proceed to get their butts kicked over and over again. If I recall correctly from our last time, we put the Greeks over on this side. We put the Trojans, so to speak, over on this side. Does anybody want to tell me what gods you can, or goddesses you can expect to be on the Greek side? Can anybody tell me one? Okay, Athena. Why Athena, Farrellyn? If that was you, Farrellyn.
Yeah, well, she likes Achilles a lot, and she also was at the judgment.
Hackamundo at Paris of Troy. One more deity you can expect to see on the Greek side.
No, it wasn't Paris.
No, Aphrodite's going to be over here. Hera is going to be on the Greek side. Poseidon, that adventurous god, is going to be on the Greek side. Ares is going to be on the Trojan side for no other reason than Homer likes to balance it out. I mean, this is the kind of god Ares is. If this were a really manly, heroic war epic, the god of war, don't you think, would be a manly, heroic guy who kicks a lot of butt in battle and nobody ever met? Doesn't that make sense? You're not going to send Pee Wee Herman off to play Ares, god of war, in your war movie. You're not going to send Seinfeld after the Germans with a rocket launcher. You send him out there with some really bad jokes. I don't like him. Apollo is on the Greek side for the Trojan side for pretty much the same reason, to balance it out. And Zeus, whose side is Zeus on? Zeus is on Zeus's side. Interestingly enough, I like to think that Homer has a special feeling in his heart for Zeus. Because who's pulling all the strings in this story, the way the story is getting told? Homer. In much the same way that Zeus pulls all the strings in the real world. Let's say that I'm going to tell my wife about my day at school. I had a really great class. I was really coherent, I was fascinating, and everybody just loved it. They even stood up and applauded me at the end. See what I put up with. But I could make that up if I wanted to. I have the power to do that. Or I could say they threw things at me, but we had a pretty good class anyway. I could do that. I could say anything I want, and it could be accepted as the truth, as long as I make it believable enough. Same thing with Homer. Same thing with Zeus. Zeus can't change the plot line of this story either, and Homer knows how he feels. So the battle goes on for about 4 books. People basically just get killed right and left for about 4 books. There's one touching scene in book 3 in which Helen is sitting out on the roof, on the walls of Troy, watching the manly Greeks line up to invade the city and get their butts kicked and stuff. And Priam, the old king of Troy, Hector's daddy, comes walking up and says, "Now what are you looking at?" Helen says, "Oh geez, you probably hate me, don't you, King Priam? Here I am, a mere female, and I caused all this horrible war and strife. Good God, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing." And Priam could have said, "Yeah, that's for damn sure," and punted her off of the wall. The Greeks took her back and they go home, end of war. But no, I mean, we've been in this war for 9 years now. We can't hardly do that. We've been at it so long. It's like a really good argument where you know you're wrong. You could just admit you're wrong and go on with your life, but you've been maintaining that you were right for so long, you have to. You ever been in that position? It's called marriage. Kidding, sweetie. What Priam does is said, "Girl, you are too hard on yourself. The reason why you did this is really because Zeus had it in his heart of hearts to create war between our people. Why don't you sit down, make yourself comfortable, and point out to me from the wall just who are these great Greek heroes? Which one of these is Agamemnon? Which one of these is Achilles? You know, just make yourself comfortable and don't be so hard on yourself, child." Whoa. Priam's being nice to Helen. And it gets better. Paris and Menelaus offer to fight each other a one-on-one duel in book 3. Menelaus is Helen's awfully wedded husband. Paris stole her. I know. Why are all these Greeks and Trojans fighting each other and killing each other? Why don't we just have a one-on-one fight between Paris and Menelaus? Does anybody want to answer that question? There's a couple of good answers, at least a couple of good answers.
The easy thing to do.
Okay, that would be too easy of a thing to do. Make too much sense.
There'd be no arete for the others.
Very good. No arete for everybody else. And we'd have no story. It would end in book 3. What happens? Paris is seized by Aphrodite because she likes him, remember? And transported back to the city of Troy before Menelaus can kill him. And he comes in there, he saunters in there, said, Aphrodite's put me back here, Dad. Hi, Helen. Hi, Dad. Aphrodite put me back here. Hector, his brother, Hector, Prince of Troy. Hector, the bravest fighter of all the Trojans, says, oh, God, Paris, I wish to hell Menelaus had killed you, you jerk. We wouldn't have had any war if it weren't for you, dingling. So, we have big brother Hector getting on little brother Paris. Paris says, hey, Helen, baby, I got the hots. Let's go perform in flagrante delicto. And Helen goes, no way. God, haven't you messed up enough lives today as it is? You know, and she just bickers. She's not interested, but Aphrodite grabs her and makes her go. Well, ponder that in your heart of hearts. In book 5, we have more fighting still. We have gods and goddesses coming down. Fight Diomedes. Wounds Aphrodite while Aphrodite is snatching her son Aeneas out of battle. And Aphrodite kind of flounces back to her abode on Mount Ida, where the seasons and graces, you know, pour soothing oils all over her and stuff. Ares also gets wounded by Diomedes, the war god. And you would think that, you know, a war god, a good war god would be like John Wayne, you know, like that movie where they blow off John Wayne's arm with a howitzer or something like this. Come on, I'll still fight you with my left hand. Or both of them, and he says, I can still kick at you. That was the Black Knight in Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
John Wayne and the Black Knight.
Well, this is what happens. Ares runs up to Mount Olympus, whining to Zeus, Dad, I got hurt, Dad. And Zeus says, you know what happened last time? You pulled this. We nailed you in a barrel for 7 years and wouldn't let you out. Stop whining now, Ares. Why is Homer making the mighty god of war look like that? Well, yeah, because he can. But, go ahead.
Because he's on the Trojan side.
Yeah.
Because he did it when he was writing it.
It could be evidence of a secret anti-war agenda. Wait till you hear Zeus deliver the world's worst come-on line. I mean, you think that I don't know, for example, that you don't make fun of me outside of this classroom. You think that I don't know, you make fun of my unique hairstyle, my vocal mannerisms, and my drawings. You do. I know that you do. And it's an important part of your college experience that you do. Make fun of your professors and think evil thoughts about them, because I did the same thing. We'd sit around and drink and bitch about our professors. It was really great. It's an important part of life. Later on, you'll get a job, and then you can complain about your bosses. And you'll get married, you can complain about your spouse. When you were a little kid, you complained about your mom and dad. And when you see mom or dad do something really stupid, it makes it all the better, doesn't it? Somehow makes you feel that life is a little bit more worth living that particular day that you see me pour coffee. Or Professor so-and-so, shall we say, has gone forth into battle with the barn door open, you know? He may be a mean, ornery old poop, And he may give you an F that'll keep you from graduating. But every time you think about this, you close your eyes and see him flouncing around on camera with his barn door open. And life isn't so bad. Am I right or am I wrong? If I'm right, you tell me I'm right.
You're right.
Louder.
You're right.
Okay. You mean to say that you make fun of me behind my back? It's the same thing with Ares, obviously. This war god who's out slaughtering people. That'd be great. It's like John Wayne. You ever see Saturday Night Live with John Wayne? Hi, you know, that sort of thing. But the Greeks continue to get their you-know-whats kicked for, let's say, another 4 more books, and Agamemnon finally gets a clue. I was wrong. I really shouldn't have made Achilles angry. I'm starting to realize that now. This is book 9. So in book 9, Agamemnon decides, well, I'm going to make a big deal of this. I am going to appoint a special embassy, a panel, if you will, of 3 people to go off to meet Achilles by the side of his swift black ships and say to him, Agamemnon realizes he messed up and he is willing to make up to you in a major way because he realizes he was wrong and we love you, man. The 3 he chooses, that Agamemnon chooses, are a fellow by the name of Phoenix. Okay. He chooses Phoenix, who is an old guy who was Achilles' tutor when Achilles was a young man. Ajax the Greater, the big hulking guy who is better with sword than he is with words, and that lying, stealing, fornicating sack of poo-poo known as Odysseus. And the 3 guys journey to the Achilles camp by the side of his swift black ships where he sits there with Patroclus. And Phoenix speaks first. Phoenix says, Achilles, you know, I carried you around when you were a baby. You know, I gave you your first glass of wine to drink. You puked up your first glass of wine on my shoulder. Let me tell you what I think, and so on. Okay, that's a pretty strong argument. I knew you when you were a little kid. Don't pull the high and mighty act with me. Your parents ever do this? I changed your diapers. And Achilles goes, well, I'm really sorry, Phoenix, but I can't. I've been dissed. Death before dishonor, you know. Can't go back. Odysseus makes his case. Odysseus says Agamemnon realizes he was wrong. Agamemnon has even offered to make up to you, Achilles. Agamemnon will let you marry his surviving daughter, Electra. He will offer you all sorts of booty, riches, prizes, and he will make a big announcement in the middle of the Greek camp saying, I, Agamemnon, was wrong. And Homer doesn't say this, but he says everything but, you know, Agamemnon will personally crawl on all 4s and kiss your butt right in the middle of the Greek camp. And Odysseus is very persuasive. Homer indulges himself in a beautiful simile describing the effect of Odysseus' words and arguments. Homer tells us that Odysseus' arguments and words were like snow falling on a tree. Each snowflake, individually beautiful, light, floats on the wind beautifully to its resting place. But when you get enough of them piled together, they will just make the branches snap off a tree with their weight and force. Beautiful simile, but Achilles isn't buying it. Ajax the Greater, this is really sad. Try to conjure up these old football movies and you know, it's the 4th quarter. There's like 23 seconds left. The Greek team is on their own 15-yard line. It's fourth and about a mile. And the star quarterback is sitting on the sidelines. He's mad. The grizzled old offensive lineman comes back on their last time out. Gee, Achilles, come on back. The team needs you, man. Don't let the team down. Remember the time that I blocked for you? Remember the time, you know? I'm making fun of it, but it can be very moving. You know, the simple, good-hearted guy who puts his heart out on the line, puts his butt in other parts of his anatomy out on the line all the time, says, come on back, man, we need you. Achilles is about to cry, but he can't. He can't go back. Here's what he says. I have two fates. My mom even told me, the influential sea goddess Thetis. She told me that I could either die young, make a really ugly corpse, but win lots of glory and honor in the Trojan War. Or I could hold off of the Trojan War, not go and fight, not be there at the end, and live just about forever, live a long, happy life, and die with no arete, no kleos whatsoever. And option number 2 is still looking really good to me right now. So, thanks, but no thanks. And he sends these folks off packing by and by. Glurp. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, back at the Greek camp, Homer treats us to, 2, 3, 4 more books of, people getting killed, severed heads with their teeth still chattering, yelling, help me, help me. Or Kristen the Brave slaying Mona and then jumping up and down on her corpse saying, woo-hoo, woo-hoo, I killed you. And stuff like that. Or JR prancing around in the stolen armor of Mitch saying, I am hot stuff, I killed Mitch. It's not very savory stuff. But every once in a while you got to throw in some humor. So here's what happens. Homer decides that Nestor is tired of talking and he wants to go fight. Nestor is about 300 years old. Nestor gets all dressed up and he gets into his chariot. Woo-hoo! On guard! Avast! And he dashes off into the Greek lines. Look, you're already laughing. He hits a bump or something, falls out of the chariot. Ah! And he's lying there in the battle where men win glory, going, I'm falling down. I can't get up. At first, the only person who hears him is Odysseus, that lying sack of poop. And he goes, did I hear something? No, la 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 la. He's not going to help Nestor. He might get killed helping Nestor. Finally, Diomedes saves him. That's pretty funny. Then in book 13, all the other gods and goddesses, they're kind of mad. Zeus has forbidden them to get involved in the battle. Ever since Aphrodite and that whining little snot Ares got wounded in battle, Zeus has said, stay out, stay out. Of course, Poseidon disguises himself, and he's in there fighting away, and I'm sure Ares is knocking around too in disguise, and Hera is mad. Hera looks around, her brother Poseidon, bustling around in the battle of where men win glory, and her heart was glad. Then Hera looked at Zeus of the Aegis, and in her eyes he was hateful. So this counsel seemed best to the lady ox-eyed Hera. Ox-eye just means big, huge, wide eyes, like a cow, which were considered very beautiful. Hera was very honored to be called ox eyes or cow eyes. Cows are beautiful animals. Decided to array herself in loveliness and go appear on Mount Ida before Zeus of the Aegis, and maybe the heart within him would be melted, and he would lie with her, and take in love, and take his mind from the battle for a while. And this is really funny. Here's what Hera does. Hera goes and visits Aphrodite, and gets, like the girdle of ultimate desire. Handy makeup tips, beautiful perfume. It's like that famous Pat Benatar video, Love is a Battlefield, right? Where all the women are all dressed up in their warlike beauty and stuff like that. We are young, heartache to heartache. Love is a battlefield. Hera can't fight with Zeus on her own terms. So what she's going to do, she's going to use sex as a weapon, because that's the only weapon she has. Aphrodite gets her all dolled up, and Hera comes flouncing by Zeus. And Zeus, whoa, hey Hera baby, what you up to? Oh, I'm going down to visit the Sintians. There's a good sacrifice going on in East Africa. And Zeus, with lust in his heart, says, my lady, there will be a time when you can go there as well. But now, never before has love so conquered my heart, melted the heart within me. There are women in this room who have probably heard that line or variants of that line, you're melting my heart. You're breaking me to your submission. Okay, that's not bad, not good, not bad either. Never before has anyone broken my heart to submission. Not even that time that Leto bore me Apollo and Artemis. Not even that time when Semele in Thebes bore me Dionysus. Not even that time when Alcmena bore me Hercules. He's a real doozy. Nor sweet-stepping Danae, who I think she bore me Perseus. That's right, back in Argos. Not even you yourself. Not so much as I love you now, honey. And the sweet desire has taken hold of me. It's the worst pickup line in all of ancient Greek antiquity. Underscoring it is the fact that Zeus, supreme god of the ancient Greeks, is using this pickup line on who? His wife. Why? Because she wants him to. Boy, does he look like a dorkarama or what? And Hera kind of smiles and says, come here, big boy. And they draw, and he goes, it's funny, he goes, oh, what happens if other gods and goddesses or humans see us? And Zeus goes, hey, baby, don't worry. I will draw a wonderful golden cloud about us, so thick that even Helios will not be able to see through it, although, as the sun god, his vision is by far the strongest. And so saying, he drew a golden, wonderful cloud about them. And beneath the cloud, the earth broke out into dewy, fresh crocus and hyacinth. Now, this is Homer's equivalent of the train running into the tunnel and the fireworks going off and the, Star-Spangled Banner playing, doo doo doo. You know what's going on, right? You don't? Okay, it's a synonym for sex. But I draw your attention to the hieros gamos aspect of the thing, the sacred marriage aspect of the thing. Remember that Zeus is the successor of Cronus, who was the successor of the sky god Uranus. That Hera is the successor of the goddess Rhea, who is the successor of the goddess Gaia. Remember, the primary purpose of this hieros gamos theme, the sacred marriage between sky god and earth goddess, is to produce rain, which produces vegetation. And here we have Zeus and Hera, for completely bizarre anthropomorphic reasons, performing the love deed inside of a golden, wonderful cloud from which dew descends and the grass breaks out in dewy green hyacinth and clover and stuff like that. Folks, that is the Hieros Gamos comeback. It's wonderful. And as we're all still, chuckling at that, Nestor gets an idea. Jeremy's eyes close as I say the words Nestor gets an idea, because Nestor is incapable of having a simple, easy to explain idea. Nestor goes over to the camp of Achilles. Says, Achilles, you want to go fight? Achilles says, no. Okay. And then Nestor goes to work on Patroclus. Because Patroclus is kind of like the Gilligan figure, kind of like the number 2, kind of like the Scottie Pippen figure. You know, it's not easy to be Michael Jordan's buddy. It's not easy to be the skipper's little buddy. You know, you want to break out and win a name for yourself as a person. And so Nestor, he uses all the weapons in his arsenal. He talks forever and ever, tells stories about his childhood, and says, Patroclus, why don't you ask Achilles if you can borrow his armor and go scare the crap out of the Trojans? And Nestor talks and talks and talks and talks until Patroclus finally probably says, shut up, I'll do it. Patroclus goes to Achilles, says, Achilles, would you consider, we're about the same size, if you really love me, Achilles, you will let me wear your armor and go into battle and win some glory for myself. Achilles doesn't think it's a good idea. After all, if you put me in a Kansas City Chiefs uniform with the number 35 on it, you can stuff it with pads until I assume the proportions of Marcus Allen. But that first run into the Oakland Raiders defensive line is going to make sure that I am not Marcus Allen. You can put me in a Los Angeles Lakers jersey with the number 34 on it. But when old meat truck Patrick Ewing comes chortling into the lane, I'm shook. I am by and by going to look like this, if you see what I mean. And Achilles tries to explain to him that this isn't a really good idea. But finally he says, okay, Patroclus, I love you, man. You need some props of your own. You need some credit. You need to do this great thing. Fine. If it means so much to you, fine. Just put on my armor and go scare the heck out of those Trojans. And it is at this point at which we're going to have to leave off, but I ask you to just contemplate the idea of Patroclus rushing the city of Troy, dressed in Achilles' armor, yelling, I'm Achilles, damn it! I want to know, what does it read on Patroclus' death certificate? Well, that's spelled out in big red letters on the top of every death certificate. See you next time.